I'd like to talk a little bit about Russia. And I'd like to compare Russia to the United States so we get a sense of perspective. Now, when I'm talking about the United States, I'm only talking about the mainland. I'm not talking about Alaska, Hawaii, or any of our holdings, island holdings. Just the United States. The United States is bordered by two countries, Canada on the north with a 4,000-mile border, and Mexico on the south with about a 2,000-mile border. On the north, Canada, just like us, same basic government system, little different. Think the same way we do about 99% of the problems. No problem. On the south, Mexico, we wring our hands because we've got this tremendous number of people who are religious, hardworking, basically honest and good family people who come here to try to make a living. That's our problem. In addition to that, we have a drug problem where a few tons of drugs come in every year to the United States and cause havoc in our inner cities. This is a true problem, but it's minuscule compared to the problems that Russia has, which I'll get into in a minute. Here we have a few people, criminals and criminal enterprises, who are very disgusting human beings who kill people, but they represent a tiny fraction of the population of both countries. That's America. Let's go to Russia. Russia's land border, not counting the oceans that it borders up the Arctic Circle and any lakes, but just their land border is twice the size of the United States land border. In other words, it's a little over 12,000 miles. They border 17 countries, not one of which likes Russia, because over the years, Russia has either invaded or threatened these countries, and these countries are still concerned about Russia. So it has no allies. And in fact, that's why after World War II, and after the Nazis invaded Russia, the Russian government made up its mind to protect itself. So it went all around and took over countries to act as buffers. It would be kind of like if we were worried about someone in South America attacking us, we might take over Mexico to use as a buffer. So if Mexico falls, we at least have time to get our army down there. So that was their theory. But as a result of that, all the surrounding countries, 17, are not fans of Russia. And they have some really crazy countries. How about North Korea bordering your border? China, no real problem going on, except China had this single child rule where you could only have one child, and because of that, the girl babies were killed in favor of keep trying until you get a boy baby. So now they've got 60, 70 million boys in China that don't have any women. So these guys go up into Russia and take Russian women back to China for their husbands. I mean, how would Buffalo like it, I think, if some Canadians came in and took a half dozen or a dozen Buffalo girls back to Canada to marry them? I don't think that would go over too well. So you can imagine that there's some simmering at the Chinese-Russian borders over this cute little habit. Oh, then we can go down to Iran. We all know about Iran, what a danger it is. But right above Iran is a country called Azerbaijan. Now, it's about 200 miles from the belly of Russia across Azerbaijan to Iran. Azerbaijan is Muslim, Shia Muslim. Iran is Shia Muslim. So it's kind of like they're kind of close. So that Iranians can come toddling in to Russia, play their games, and go back to Iran. And the games they play? Well, let's put it this way. Russia suffers in 1 month more terrorism than the United States has suffered in its history. It's a constant blowing up and destroying. And this scares the Russians. They worry about this. Plus, there's a lot of proselytizing, that is, converting of Russians into Muslim. The threat being either become a Muslim or I cut off your head. So it's kind of persuasive. Russia has about 22 people per square mile. That makes it about 1/4 as populated as Texas. Now, if you take the number of Russians that are in the cities away from that and just take the rest of them that are left, that makes them about 6 people per square mile. If you do that in Texas, you have 3 times the number of people per square mile than you do in Russia. It's closer to 16, 17. If you've ever driven across Texas, it's like there's nobody home. You go for miles and miles and miles, and it's empty. Russia is worse than that. Let me put it to you this way. Could you imagine a 1,000,000-man army with all the supplies they need to feed those that 1,000,000-man army 3 squares a day, which is 3 million meals a day, plus the guns and the supplies and all the armament? Okay, what if we landed a 1,000,000-man army in around New York City and made it all the way to Chicago, which is about 700 miles, and nobody would know it? It's impossible. But if you went up by the Bering Strait, by Alaska, between Alaska and Russia, okay, and went around to the Arctic Ocean, and then came down on the East Siberian Sea, okay, somewhere around in there, you could land a 1,000,000-man army and march 800 miles, which is further than Chicago from New York, and nobody would even know you're there. That's how empty Russia is. It's important to keep that in mind. There's nobody home. There's nobody there. It's vast areas of emptiness, surrounded by 17 countries that hate them and fear them, and a couple of countries that are Muslim and want to get them or convert them. That's a hellacious problem. It dwarfs our Mexicans coming in here or Hispanics coming in here. It dwarfs any problem we have. They are in real trouble. They don't even have a fresh or saltwater port that goes anywhere. So that if they wanted, for instance, we're quibbling about a gas pipeline or an oil pipeline from Canada down to Louisiana. Oh, it's a big deal, you know. But we can take it to Louisiana, we could take it to New York or the East Coast. Not New York, I'm sure, but the East Coast or the West Coast, or bring it across Canada, no problem. You can't do that in Russia. The distances are way too far. The temperatures are way too cold. You have to go to very limited areas, and you're immediately, in order to get your coal or your oil or your gas out of the country where you can sell it, you got to go to a country that doesn't like you, that argues with you, that'll shut down your pipeline. They have terrible problems. Putin's got just nonsensical problems by our standards. We couldn't, it would dwarf. Washington gets bollocksed up by immigration. Can you imagine how we would be in knots if we had the problems Russia has? So let's go on. The Russian government made a very serious miscalculation during the Cold War when it decided that the United States was the biggest threat to its existence. They spent billions of rubles on submarines and expensive nuclear weaponry that was totally unnecessary, because at no time did the United States really give a damn about the Russians, much less wanting to invade them or go to war with them. And this tradition of hating the United States is very useful for Russian politicians coming to office. In the same way that our president can talk about better jobs or reduce taxes and get us all fired up in the United States, the Russians can talk about building up their army and all this macho crap, and it seems to work on a number of Russian people. In other words, enough of them to sustain some popularity. But it's a huge mistake. Russia's problem isn't the United States. It's the Muslim countries. They are out to get Russia for what Russia did in Afghanistan when it invaded under Brezhnev in '79. Afghanistan was Russia's Vietnam, for those of you who don't remember. And Russia was thrown out because of the work the United States did with the Afghans. But that's history. Let's bring it up to date. So what's Putin up to? Why is he causing Obama so much problem? Well, you remember Gorbachev? He and Reagan made peace in a sense. And the Berlin Wall came down. And from then on until George Bush the Small, that's the junior, Russia was trying to lean toward the West and get rid of that anti-American kind of theology, if you will. But with George Bush, things changed. Because now America was going into the Middle East and stirring things up. Even though Iran was run by maybe crazy zealots, as far as Russia was concerned, the lid was on it. The lid was on Syria. The lid was on Lebanon. As long as things just sort of stayed this way. But old George Bush, no. He had to go into Afghanistan, throw the lid off, throw out the powers that be, and start the turmoil. And then Pakistan got involved with it, and Pakistan started to get boiling. And Musharraf, who was head of Pakistan, had the lid on there. But the war with Afghanistan and our supply trucks coming through Pakistan, that just embroiled the whole region. And then Iraq, holy cow, we kill Saddam Hussein, who's keeping, again, the lid on. And now we're after Syria. Oh, if you were running Russia and you had no real means of protecting your borders. Now remember, the United States can protect its borders if it wants to. If it wants to, we've got the money and the ability to put a fence around the United States like nobody has. We could do it. Russia couldn't do it, even if they wanted to, even if they had a lot more money, which they don't. So they depend on the world to just sort of get along and go along. When we go over there, which is their backyard, and start turning things over, Egypt had a great leader that just kept the lid on as far as Russia's concerned. And now he's out of business. We abandon him. And from Putin's standpoint, we're idiots that are coming into his neighborhood and are going to end up causing his country, Russia, to have a nuclear weapon go off inside it. Because remember, while they call America the great Satan, under the covers, they really hate Russia. They really do. And Russia is so easy to get to for them. So, in a nutshell, that's it. We caused our own problems. George Bush going over there, opening cans of worms. Now the revolution's going on. It's just too much for Putin. He wants us out of there. Not in an anti-American sense, but in a quit stirring up the pot, because we're the ones that are going to have to be paying for this. That's simple. It's that simple to understand Russia. You can go into all the socioeconomic and all about their ability to mine oil or to dig for oil and their gas supplies. But basically, Russia is a poor country who, if it weren't for its oil and gas that it sells outside the region or outside the country, they would have really nothing going on. And all they want is to just get along. Russia doesn't have, at this point, any great scheme to take over anything. But they're absolutely terrified of the Muslims and the insane, extreme Muslim positions. And they're in the middle of it. They're surrounded by it. And there's nothing they can do about it, except hopefully get the United States the hell out of the area. What about Putin's handling of the homosexual issue? Well, some of it is just macho for his home base. Some of it, though, does appeal to the Muslim community. In other words, the Muslims abhor homosexuality as well as liquor and all that. He's not so far, he can't go as far as to abandon Russian vodka, but he can make a statement against homosexuality, which he hopes to appease the Muslims. He's hoping, long term, don't stir the pot, we can get by this. Again, I think like they're arming up for a war with the United States, they're making a huge mistake in underestimating, as are we under this president. By not confronting the Muslims, we are making a huge mistake.